Hi, and welcome to the third episode of Holistic Health Guide. I'm Kathryn Berg, and I'll be your guide for today. Today's topic is Ask Me Anything About Homeopathy. Prior to creating this podcast, from time to time, I would have webinars where clients and others could come onto a Zoom call and ask whatever questions they had about homeopathy. This episode will come from questions that were asked in one of those calls. You'll find it more spontaneous and lighter than scripted episode. The video will also not be as clear for those of you who are watching, but I promise it will be just as informative and helpful. I can anticipate what people might want to ask, but I can't know for sure. So I always appreciate being able to answer questions spontaneously. After all, being able to just talk about the background, the history, and the philosophy of homeopathy is one of the reasons I decided to start this podcast. And who knows, someone might have asked a question that you have been wondering about regarding homeopathy. And if you stick around until the end, we'll discuss alternative methods for taking homeopathic remedies. Even if you think you know what they might be, there are a couple you might not have thought. So let's get started. Have you ever wondered how your favorite holistic health practices really work? Are you curious to learn more? Welcome to Holistic Health Guides. I'm Kathryn Berg, a classical homeopath with over 20 years of experience. Join us as we explore homeopathy, stem cell activation patches, the Enneagram, and much more. Let's dive in and uncover the secrets and tips behind your favorite holistic health modalities. The first question someone asked me on this particular webinar was about treating pets with homeopathy, and here is my response. I love the idea of people treating their pets with homeopathy because animals don't have a placebo effect, right? They just get better or they don't. I'm going to just share mostly about my dog because I haven't been treating pets in quite a few years. There is a really good book that you could get if you're interested in treating your pet. And it's Dr. Pitcairn's Natural Pet Care book for cats and dogs. But if you just remember Pitcairn, Pitcairn, you can find his book on Amazon. He's a really good homeopath. I've heard him speak. He very much knows the philosophy and the background of homeopathy. He's not just a diagnosis equals prescription kind of prescriber. So he's really good. I was able to help some cats in the neighborhood or people who had questions just by looking in his book. So the best story I have is my dog, who was a puppy and would not go up and down the stairs. I couldn't get him to go up and down the stairs. He was scared. And I was concerned about it. I tried a couple different remedies. What was interesting is he just got tired of us carrying him up and down the stairs and he started sleeping in the crate that was downstairs. So that was kind of nice. Had a little more sleep. He'd move around and I'd kind of wake up at night, just like having a kid again when he was a puppy. I was talking with a colleague of mine one day. She was over at my office and we were sharing some remedies. She said, have you ever used the remedy boron? And haven't ever had any reason to. What's an element on the periodic table? Well, here's my periodic table. Always have one handy. Doesn't everyone? It's in column 3, row 2, boron. I also have a repertory in my electronic repertories, and I was looking at fear of going up and downstairs. It was in there because it's not an uncommon problem. One of the remedies in there was boron. And she had just asked me about that, and I thought, okay, this is just too coincidental. I had never even thought about that remedy before, much less prescribed it, right? I ordered it, got the remedy, gave him the remedy, and the next day we were able to convince him to go up and down the stairs with some treats. We had never been able to do that before. It was just made too much sense to be a coincidence. So he has gone up and down the stairs. His constitution is mercury, and homeopathic mercury is a common remedy in acute care homeopathy. But there are a couple of really common symptoms, and one is lots of drooling. You'll see that especially in mercury acutes. that in addition to this hot, cold temperature thing, you can get all this drooling. And I found myself saying about him one day, he's kind of mercurial. You just never know what to expect. It could change every day. And I went, okay, I know what remedy he needs. Told myself. So that has helped him a lot. He's kind of an excitable dog, and Mercury as a remedy is kind of anxious. And his mother was apparently a high-strung female poodle. He's a Bernedoodle. He's about 55 pounds. Those are my stories about pets. With animals, I would always start with the 30C, especially with something like that. My Akita had hip dysplasia, and we were taking him to a different holistic vet at the time. This was many, many years ago, like a couple of decades ago or more. And he gave him a 1M, which was appropriate for that particular type of situation. You don't want to aggravate a kidney kind of situation, really. So I would give it to him or her and just watch and see what happens. And you might have to dose 2 or 3 times to get a response at a 30C. And then if the symptoms start to come back, I'm assuming he or she has symptoms. The next question that someone asked me was if I could make some recommendations on some good resources for homeopathic books and such. On my website, there are some books that I've recommended. Dana Allman has some books, and they were the first ones I bought, and they're still really good books. Ullman, Dana Allman. I don't know if it's 2 N's or 1. It doesn't matter. You'll find him. He has a website where you can buy a lot of his stuff too, as opposed to giving the money to Amazon. The next question someone asked me was about protocol and suppression of symptoms and using more than one remedy at a time. Here are my answers. I always think that Western medicine either masks or suppresses symptoms. It drives them deeper or it just hides them. And then they eventually show up some other way. That's can also be done with homeopathy. Some of these protocols are really quite suppressive as opposed to healing. And the Banerjee protocols, if you don't know what they are, there's just these Indian doctors who came up with these protocols for certain diagnoses. Just because you have a diagnosis doesn't mean we know what remedy you need. In fact, if there were 25 people in the room with, let's say, fibromyalgia, chances are only a couple of them would need the same remedy because there's just so many. Rus tox is one of the remedies for fibromyalgia, by the way, but for a lot of other ones too. I don't do the protocols because I think that they can be suppressive, but the Banerjees put them together as a last resort, not a first resort. The Banerjees are classical homeopathy. One of my colleagues went and studied with them, and so they do classical homeopathy. And they came up with these protocols for situations where they couldn't find any remedy to help somebody. The only thing I can say that's a little different now since COVID is that a lot of practitioners are finding they do need to alternate remedies, or they need to do more organ support. And organ support is stuff that we do, organ therapeutics, where you give a very low potency of a remedy. You can kind of think about potencies as having different levels. And they do. They have a different vibration at a different level, and they also have a different vibration in every remedy. 1M Rus tox is going to vibrate here, and a 30C is going to vibrate here. They don't really run into each other. C potencies are 1 in 100. So it's 1 part of the substance to 99 parts of water. The X potencies are 1 in 10. So these are Roman numerals. And so it's 1 part to 9 parts of water, 1 part of substance. And so there's more material dose, these lower potencies, X potencies. And so they tend to work more towards the organ that there is an affinity for. One of the best known remedies for liver problems is lycopodium. But if you give it on as an X potency, it should only affect the liver and not affect anything else. If it's a match, you still have to match it, the symptom. So taraxacum, which is dandelion, is going to have a tympanic abdomen. It's going to be tight and it's going to feel like a drum. Whereas lycopodium is going to be really gassy as part of their liver symptom. It's tough to match the symptoms. But so I find that I'm doing more and more organ support, supporting organs kind of underneath with other ones, but it isn't a protocol per se. It's, well, what does this person need? This person needs this constitutional remedy, but I don't think the constitutional remedy alone can deal with the organ for now. It doesn't mean they're going to have to take that the rest of their life, but it just means for now, we need to give this organ a little bit more support, whichever one it is that is their chief complaint. I had a client once who had a situation where she should have been dealt with as a child and she wasn't, and so it resulted in her getting kidney stones a lot. Oh, Berberis vulgaris, we call it in homeopathy. I had her taking a 3X, so it's a very low potency of that to go along her constitution. Remember, I had this client, oh my gosh, she was on an antidepressant, and this is a long time ago. And she was doing really pretty well on her remedy. And she's like, yeah, I just decided I was doing so well. Just decided to stop the, don't do that. But, you know, she suffered a little bit, but she got through it. The next question someone asked me was about homeopathy and cancer. There's the option to support the others, you know, like, so if somebody's throwing up, we have remedies, you know, so that they don't. I want to say there are remedies to help prevent your hair from falling out, but since I couldn't stop my hair from falling out with COVID, I guess I can't say that. It isn't the chemicals that directly make your hair fall out, the chemotherapy, it's because it's so hard on your body. That's why your hair falls out. There are certainly things that could potentially be done for somebody that would make it just less harsh on their body. There are definitely remedies to be used for post-radiation and radiation burns and all those kinds of things. There are all, you know, definitely remedies that can help sort of support the treatment. One of the most intense vomiting remedies out there is made from ipecac, which is what we used to use to induce vomiting. I don't think doctors really do that so much anymore. I don't even know if you can get it. But as a remedy, you can, and it can help stop vomiting. But there are other ones too. It would just depend on her symptom. Yeah. And she might have some strange or odd little symptom that would direct us to something else. And the other thing about supporting people with cancer is their symptoms change a lot. They can feel this way for 2 weeks and then feel a different way later. Yeah. You really need to check in with them a lot to make sure that the remedies are still working, because their symptoms can change and what they need could change. So you have to have a lot of them available and help them out. Just speaking of cancer, I'll just talk about this for a little bit. In homeopathy, we have what are called miasms. And miasms are basically disease categories. When Dr. Hahnemann was alive, he's the one who developed this concept and came up with it. There are certain symptomatic similarities in all these different miasms. So when he was around, there were 3 of them, and there was what's called a psoric miasm. There was a psychotic miasm and a syphilitic miasm. And the psoric miasm is about unquenchable optimism and lots of skin issues. Sulfur, and you've got serenum, which is always so positive, I guess. The psychotic miasm is spelled with an S, not a P, SYCOTIC. That's associated with gonorrhea. And it's associated with hiding. So when you have people who physically hide, like children who might hide behind their parents or something like that, or people who just aren't open and honest about things, people who won't tell you very much, you have to know that you're looking for a remedy in that miasmatic grouping. And then there's a syphilitic one, in which that one is associated with syphilis. And that's more about hopelessness and things kind of falling apart. Then along came a tubercular miasm, which fits in between a couple of the others, and a cancer miasm. The tubercular miasm is about, well, tuberculosis, right? And tubercular miasm is just never quite being satisfied, always wanting to be going somewhere, always wanting to be doing something. The grass is always greener, and that is very much the characteristic of the people who get tuberculosis. It is a disease of poverty. And so naturally, the grass is always greener somewhere else when you are poor and you don't have any money. What are the characteristics of carcinosis? Overdoing it on behalf of other people. It's a lack of boundaries, just like cancer is a disease with a lack of boundaries. And so the people who need it need to shore up their boundaries this one. There's even more of them now. There's a ringworm miasm and there's leprosy miasm. As you can imagine with that one's like, you're really shunned. You feel shunned. I mean, you really are. You feel shunned. A lot of people believe, and I'm one of them. Okay, I'm here to say I'm one of them, that it was made in a lab. And I mean, there's this little CRISPR thing where you can take these different things and, put them together. I mean, it's like a science fiction horror movie combo. So I think malaria was one of the things that got stitched together to the coronavirus. I think malaria, the protozoa, was somehow stitched together with it because there were so many cases, especially originally, where people thought they were over it and then they got sick again. They got worse right away. They said, "Oh, I'm feeling good." And 3 days later, they come down with it again. So it's just typical malaria symptoms. That's one of them, is these intermittent symptoms where they come and they go, because that's what malaria is. Malaria fever is one that comes and goes. I hope you found the questions and answers interesting and helpful. There were many other questions that were asked that I may include in an upcoming episode of Holistic Homeopathy. Being able to answer general questions about homeopathy for listeners is, after all, one of the reasons I started this. Do you have some questions you'd like answered? I suppose you could count on someone else to ask your questions. But if you want to make sure that your questions get asked, you can send an email to holistichealthguide@proton.me. That's holistichealthguide@proton.me. If you send an email, you might get your questions answered on an upcoming episode of Holistic Health Guide. Otherwise, you'll have to cross your fingers and hope that someone else has asked. But please don't send messages asking me for a remedy to take for your situation. That's not what this is about. And it would just take too much time. Again, that is holistichealthguide@proton.me. And finally now, as promised earlier, today I'll share some alternative ways to take homeopathic remedies. Sometimes taking a remedy orally just isn't an option. Maybe someone isn't alert enough due to an illness, or perhaps you're unconscious because of a head injury. So extremely sensitive individuals also often need alternative methods for homeopathy. And let's be honest, sometimes kids and even adults just refuse to take any kind of medicine. Interestingly, the refusal to take medicine is actually a symptom in homeopathy. There are 17 remedies listed under refuses medicine. However, if your patient typically refuses treatments, this would not be the time to consider that symptom unless it's an unusual occurrence in an acute situation. One alternative method is to simply sniff the vial containing the remedy pellet or liquid. Inhale deeply through each nostril as if you're taking 2 pellets, and that's it. And then wait. For an unconscious patient, say from a head injury or slipping due to a high fever, you can dissolve the pellet in distilled water. Use about 1/4 of a cup of water with 1 dose and stir rapidly for 30 seconds. Don't worry if the pellets don't fully dissolve. You'll need a thin, fragrance-free rag or towel, and if you can't find one, a paper towel will do. And dip it in the remedy water, making sure it's quite wet in one spot, and dab it on the patient's lips. Repeat as needed. Alternatively, keep a dropper vial of common remedies for concussions handy, especially if you're involved in sports or have kids, and just put a drop on the patient's lip. But you don't want to give an unconscious patient pellets because they could choke. Finally, an unusual but effective method is to dissolve the remedy in water and use a spray bottle to mist it around the patient. This technique was popular with a local dispensary for a particular remedy for children on the spectrum, helping them feel less overwhelmed in public. And the spray contained several different potencies of the same remedy, and this is known as a homeopath. Now, some might think that they could sneakily get a family member to take a remedy, but spraying someone while they're sleeping, especially an adult, is unethical. As a parent, you can decide for your sick child, but for adults, it's a different story, unless it's a life or death situation. I hope you'll find these alternative methods of taking homeopathic remedies helpful and informative. Stay tuned for more tips and insights in our next episode. Until that time, be happy and healthy.